I remember asking Ken Cragen, so what is it that makes a Beyoncé break out of Destiny's Child or a Justin Timberlake break out of NSYNC? I mean, what is it? And because they all, at some level, have really great voices.
We use that word, signature talk or signature sound or whatever the case may be. Finding that only happens.
One of my little isms, but I realized this is not very becoming. At some degree, when you abuse a word too much, it can kind of take away from your polish. All right, well, welcome back to She Means Millions. We are going to have just a really organic conversation today. And we were kind of talking a little bit off camera. And we were like, why aren't we recording this? Because this is a really good conversation, really just talking about charisma and magnetism, kind of sort of a continuation, piggybacking from our networking episode, and how you can just be the type of person that people want to work with. How can you embody that? And it's funny, we were talking about some of the celebrities that have really made the biggest names for themselves and kind of reflecting back on the beginnings of their careers. One of them, Taylor Swift, and how, the artist that she was when she started versus the charismatic powerhouse that she is now, and the evolution. And even Carrie Underwood when she auditioned on American Idol, and the powerhouse that she is now, and the charisma that they've cultivated. It was like, is it something that you can learn, or is it something that you're born with? And I think the thing that we've kind of come to the conclusion of is
some people are born with it and they just naturally charismatic, but it can be learned.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. And I love that you're using some singers as an example. I remember watching Peabo Bryson the first time he performed. Our band performed with him. And I remember saying to someone, what kind of singer is this? His name's called Peabo. And I remember just, I was, just being kind of like uncomplimentary, Peabo, what kind of name is that? Well, Peabo came out on stage and blew the house down.
Yeah. Wow.
But I remember though, but tell you what I really remember though, seeing him for the first time then, and he was a phenomenal singer, and then seeing him a year later where his confidence grew to a whole nother level. And he was a different person on that stage a year later.
Yeah.
He actually had a lot to do with bringing Celine Dion into mainstream. I mean, they sang Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah.
Oh,
I had never heard of Celine Dion before Beauty and the Beast, but I knew Peebo's voice, and I'm like, who is that woman? And this was before you could just look things up, and I found out it was Celine Dion. And of course she went on to become a powerhouse.
Yeah.
But what did they both do? What do they have in common? Taylor Swift, all of them, they honed their craft. I mean, they honed it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Not just their voice, not just their look, but their charisma. I remember asking Ken Cragen, so what is it that makes a Beyoncé break out of Destiny's Child or a Justin Timberlake break out of NSYNC? I mean, what is it? And because they all, at some level, have really great voices.
Yeah, a lot of talent.
Yeah. And he always said that the it factor, their it is lit. There's just this thing that comes out and it translates into magnetism and charisma.
And when you ask David Foster, who's written, all kinds of mega hits, he talks about in his particular case, that he was in a course. I mean, he was one of the guest speakers in Ken Cragen's course that he taught at UCLA. David Foster was one of his expert guest lecturers. And he said, that what he observed more than anything was, even as a musician, that you need to network. Because again, it's back to that whole thing that nobody knows who you are if you're buried in your basement. You know what I mean? If you aren't out meeting people. Because here's the facts. There are unbelievable talented speakers, performers that will only achieve a certain level of success because for a number of reasons, whether networked or ingratiated, the audience that they're performing in front of at a level, at a frenzy level, where they're clamoring to see them do more, you know?
Can we talk about packaging for a minute? Because I think packaging has a lot to do with stepping into your next level of charisma. I mean, the truth of the matter is, and I'm not saying that this is the right thing, but the truth of the matter is somebody that isn't really great but is packaged really well from a marketing perspective will often, you know, at least initially do better than someone who has all the chops, all the smarts, all the everything, but never got packaged and was never really seen, you know, as a breakout. And you can watch it just happen. I've got a photo of Carrie Underwood auditioning. I'm sure you can find it if you do a search, auditioning for American Idol, and then just watching her by the end of that program, that season. And they took her, and as she got better and better and others got eliminated, they started packaging her and packaging her and packaging her. And she became, you know, what is now arguably one of the top, you know, country music artists today. And she got packaged, right? And so there is something to be said about, yes, I get it. It's easy to be like, why should I have to make that kind of investment in getting myself packaged? And that includes the videos and the marketing message and the website, right? And
the brand photos
and all the things. And that just feels like, you know, this huge investment. I know I'm great. And that's because when you're in the sea, particularly, Kym, snap your fingers. You do it. You do it. Like he's got those drummer, that musician, you know, I can't do it nearly. But you can tell who's Kym's. Close your eyes. Okay, you go. We know who's Kym's, but there's something to be said about someone who's put it all together in a way that gets you served up. I think you have a program called Serve Up, Serve You Up or something like that. But it gets you served up in a way that people go, wow, and they want to know more. They like lean in versus turning to the next person. It stops people, right? And in the small business space, I think we so underestimate how few people do it and why the few that do start to become really stellar. And you get some really good packaging. It raises your confidence level, you know, and it takes some courage to do that, to get yourself packaged in a way. And you come across more confident. You then start speaking, whether it be on podcasts or you own your own podcast or you're getting on stages and you do it consistently. You start developing your chops and you get your, you know, narrative down. It's just such a big deal in separating you from most people who might do one thing or the other things or none of the things. And yet they're great out there, just like all the people that don't make it on these great shows.
You know what's interesting is you saying this. So one of the things that we do when it comes to packaging people with Serve You Up is their brand photography. And I think what's interesting is we don't just shoot brand photos. We bring in the stylist, hair, makeup, everything. And sometimes the transformations are kind of dramatic. We have a fitting the day before the shoot.
Yeah.
And the clothes that are often pulled are nothing that they would have ever pulled for themselves. Yeah. And what's interesting is
I know what you're going to say.
It's very uncomfortable for people at first. And then most of them end up buying the clothes anyway.
I was just going to say, that's the thing, how fast the transformation can actually happen.
And it's really just a shift in how they see themselves because they've never saw themselves as this prime time superstar.
Yeah.
But the minute they see themselves packaged, they become her. And it's interesting because they're just clothes, but you really do start to embody an entirely different being once you've seen yourself in a certain light. And I will never forget one of our clients, Veronica Bond. She's actually also an executive managing director in Phoenix, Arizona. And she has a podcast and her whole brand is about helping you be visible. And she came in for the program herself. And it's interesting because even somebody who specializes in visibility, you can't see what other people see in you when it comes to packaging your brand. Even if you think you're good at it, it always takes somebody mirroring back to you what you can't see, because it's kind of like that broccoli that's stuck in your teeth. Like, unless someone tells you it's there, you just can't see it. And we could see in her something bigger than what she was seeing. And
she was a little uncomfortable with a couple of the outfits. Now those are the pictures she uses for everything.
And whenever she has a big speaking engagement, I noticed she'll repurpose one of those outfits. But beyond just the physical outfits, there's been an entire identity shift in her confidence, and as a result, her magnetism when she walks into a room. I just noticed it when I saw her at the Platinum Summit. She just had a different swagger,
Yeah.
you know? And I think that is the magic of getting packaged and seeing yourself as a
But you also pointed out something else that as I look at evaluating Veronica and her progress, she's a managing director, so she's in front of audiences every single week, every single month. She's talking to people. She's honing her craft. She's
a podcast.
Also a fantastic student. She was a Pinnacle member as well, so she used us, the trifecta, as her executive advisory board. I mean, she really does lean in.
But think about those distribution points. Again, being the managing director in front of people, and then she's got her podcast, right? So this allows her to be front and center, and her audience is able to find her and hear from her and philosophies and things that she's teaching. The same as, it's pretty interesting with our podcast. I can't get over, and I know better, but people who say, I'm learning things about you guys that I've never knew before. I'm glued to hearing the conversation. Well, here's the thing. Before we started this podcast, there was no access like this.
Yeah.
You follow me? And the difference that it makes. But it's also not, you can become stagnant even when you package yourself, because your package can get old.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it's not one and done, Chuck.
I mean, people need to see and hear different. I mean, it's, there's no shortage of content. We all know that, right? So the content is, it's outrageous how much content is out there. So it really becomes where you become more surgical in what kind of packaging you're doing. Yeah. So it's actually elevated, because whatever you do the first time, that resets your what I call your style set point. It's just been raised at this new level. And now you just can't stay there.
Yeah.
You just continue to bring new. And we start off with talking about music, but none of those artists would be who they are if they didn't constantly also release new material.
Right. Yeah.
They have to feed their audience and give them something new to clamor to.
And create a signature sound.
Right?
And you know what they're doing? They're listening to themselves, and they're watching themselves, and they're playing back how they're performing so that they can identify where they need to improve. It's amazing to me how many people speak or do a podcast, but they don't like to watch themselves or listen to themselves or hear themselves.
I have to say, I'm one of them.
But you have had a ton of practice, and you've been forced to watch yourself.
I am. I'm listening to the podcast. I before we started, today I said, here's one of the lessons that I've learned. That when I'm leaning in or talking to one of you, I'm saying your names to make sure that the listener can follow along.
It's so true. It's the key to becoming more magnetizable.
Yeah.
Magnetizable.
Always learning.
Magnetic.
Yeah, magnetizable.
New word, magnetizable. No, it's the key to becoming magnetic, though, is being able to identify where you're not so that you can become better.
Yes.
I think it was in our first batching day, I was listening back to some of our shows, and I realized I am no longer allowed to say the word literally, because I literally say it all the time, a lot, Yeah. And it's one of my little isms, but I realized this is not very becoming, at some degree. When you abuse a word too much, it can kind of take away from your polish. And so I decided I needed to really dial that back, and it was a conscious effort that only could come from listening to myself or watching myself. And I think that the best artists are students of themselves, so that they can sharpen that. You can't sharpen what you don't know needs to be sharpened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think of the Kardashians? Think back to when they started.
Oh my gosh.
Because they were blasted for doing nothing, you're the stars.
Famous for nothing.
You became famous for nothing, And
they're magnetic as heck.
Yeah, and people love to watch them.
Yep.
And
I'm particularly in love watching them because now they have brands.
Oh yeah.
And now, I guess because they own their own show, is that why?
Yes. So the Kardashians is my guilty pleasure on Hulu. I will say it right now. I love watching the Kardashian show because they're the executive producers of it.
Right.
So they get to have a say in what's shown and what's not. And they do. They all have their own brands now. And so what I think is really particularly fun about the show now, that it's their show and not owned by E, and, was more so just about the craziness of their life. They still show that, but they really do show the behind the scenes of their brands.
These
And
girls work.
they work. And I love when they show like the behind the scenes of their brand shoots because I'm in that space and I love to see the setups and the ideas and the creativity. I get so inspired by watching what they do because those girls got some budget, okay?
And still get frustrated and still get let down and
Yeah.
right all the things that we think somehow if we make more money we will outgrow.
Yeah, they still get betrayed, they still get burned, they still make mistakes, things still fall through the cracks.
They still struggle with each other.
Yep.
And make up.
Yep,
you
and
know.
move on. Yeah, rise together
And that
stronger.
momager, can I just say,
Yeah.
that Kris
Yeah.
Jenner,
Oh yeah.
she's something else.
She is.
She is something else.
Mm-hmm.
And I, to me, if I watch one show and get one takeaway that I can apply in my own life or my own business,
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
I didn't know that you watched the Kardashians.
I do on occasion.
I thought I was alone.
Yeah.
I'm always embarrassed to say it in our community because I feel like people judge me. I'm like, it's a really good show. You should watch
Well,
it.
it's particularly good now that I didn't like it when it was all about the drama,
Yeah.
but I really love the new format where it's so much revealing about their businesses. That to me is sexy.
And think about the stop points, though. Along the way, they've had support. They've also read negative press on themselves, right?
Oh, yeah.
And they had to move through the negativity, through the those statements, and stay true to what was working for them.
Mm-hmm.
But they've evolved as people.
Yes.
I really like seeing like pictures of the Kardashians in the first year or two,
Yeah.
and pictures of them now. You know what I mean? And the level of confidence. It's discovery. I mean, we use that word signature talk or signature sound or whatever the case may be. Finding that only happens in doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And doing lots of it,
Over
and
over.
not settling, because believe me, we all can lean on each other. Let's see what she's doing. Let's see what is happening there or over here, and you can learn from that. But it's all about your unique special sauce. What's unique and different about you, and and it's okay to challenge yourself. With wanting to get answers around this talk or this webinar that I'm doing is not getting the response that I want. You know what I mean? Or I don't have the audience. Hey man, you can start off with 5 or 10. Whatever it is to begin the journey.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you feel like you're drowning in your business? Like you're doing everything and something has to give, but you're afraid it might be you? What if I told you there's a network of over 500,000 women entrepreneurs, all dedicated to supporting each other? A network of women helping women. I'm Sandra Yancey, founder of eWomen Network, and I'm inviting you to join us and become a member. eWomenNetwork.com. We can't wait to meet you.
Okay, so I'm curious to know when you think about magnetism, and you think about, in particular, the digital marketing side of it, there is an element of really understanding kind of whether somebody tells you or you recognize it in yourself, what is the kind of thing that becomes signature to you that you can create and recreate and recreate and recreate and get the expansion, even if it's just in snippets, right, of on your digital platforms, right? So I know, for me, I think because I was originally trained, when I think about really starting to speak, I had an ABC radio show and really had to learn sound bites and, going into commercial breaks and creating the teas so that they stay during the commercials. And then understanding that after the commercial was over that, now you have all new people that might have gotten in their car. And so you have to bring them up to speed so they don't switch the channel. And, you got to hit the bottom of the hour news break really hard within 7 seconds because people paid a lot of money to be sponsored, to sponsor that news break, et cetera. And so it really forced me to study the greats. And I got to tell you, at the time, there wasn't a lot of women options for me, in the beginning in 2002. And so I studied Larry King. Larry King. And I liked his style. He was kind, but I just really watched it. I remember we used to record him, and then I would go back because he was on at a time that I think I was momming, at the time with the kids. And so I couldn't watch it live, but I would go back and watch it after the kids went to bed. And by recording, I'm talking like on VHSs, if I remember correctly, and just go back and watch it over and over and over again. And I learned the power of sound bites, so that today I speak in sound bites still to this
your
day.
signature.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so knowing that, then what is it that you have to take some responsibility to find out what are some of the unique things that people, listen to a compliment or listen to what people are saying about you and leaning into that. That's how you kind of create some of your signature sound. And I know even today when I think about, short form on social media, really zeroing in on those clips that have a sound bite because it connects, or listening to how people, because I always say, are you tracking with me? You know what I mean? And people are starting to ask their audiences if they're tracking with them too, kind of thing. And knowing that that's okay, there's enough for everyone, but knowing that it is part of your signature sound, I think is important, so that you know what you want to do more of, because it's landing, it's connecting with your audience.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a really good point, Sandra. I'm also reminded of people who, when they don't have the right support mechanism, let me put this in perspective. When we moved here with the Dallas Cowboys, you and I had never seen fandom like we see in Dallas, okay? We were from Ohio, and not that Ohio had good teams too, but they didn't have the Dallas Cowboys in terms of reputation.
Yeah.
And I remember it was a key observation when we went to our first game. And as we got close, we saw all these people walking towards the stadium, and they all had on players' jerseys. All right, they got the other players' jerseys. That's who I'm rooting for. They get into the stands. First of all, they have to pay a real hefty fee to get into the stands. So they get into the stands.
You have to pay a hefty fee to park.
A hefty fee to park.
Then to get into the
So they get in the stands, and they're revving up in their seats, just revving up, and then and waiting for the players to come out. And the players come out just to warm up. The players come out and warm up. They erupt in their seats into a standing ovation, and they're clapping, and they're just warming up. And I sat there and I looked at this and I thought, my gosh, those players are on their field of dreams. Yeah. They're living their dreams, living their life. We
are in the stands.
Bought a ticket. We're in the stands cheering for them, giving them a standing ovation, and we had to pay to do it.
Right.
And it made me realize, who's standing up for you and in your career? When's the last time you got out of bed in the morning and there was a cheering crowd there saying, way to go, Sandra, way to go.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? They have all these things around them. You know what I mean?
Including coaches.
Including coaches.
People that are telling them the truth, people that are fine-tuning them, people that are making them do an extra rep, an extra iteration on something. So many of those practices, I think, are transferable. In sports, are transferable into business.
No doubt.
I agree. But that is the common denominator, right? They've got the coaching, they've got the tutoring,
They've got the agent that's making them feel great and is advocating for them.
Right. And of course, they've got to do their part, because they've got to practice like, nobody's business, right?
When no one's watching.
When nobody's watching, they can't be marginal.
Yeah.
And that's really about your journey. You can't be marginal in what you do. You can't be marginal about your dream and your ambition, and setting the intention, and then the action to go with that intention to make it happen.
I love to study the GOATs in every profession, including sports. And, who is the greatest of all time, like a Tom Brady. And, he was a 6th round draft pick, I do believe, and wasn't really identified as to be someone that would be the GOAT.
Yeah, major standout.
And, of course, he was surrounded, he had a lot of respect for his coach, and surrounded by a team, and got better and better and better. But what I really appreciate about Tom, and anybody that's great across any profession, is just the amount of hours they put into honing their craft, the discipline.
Yeah.
The discipline that most people never see. I feel like there's a saying I read somewhere, something to the effect of,
in my music training, I remember at Capitol Records, they would have different artists. People come in and says, hey, this guy can sing as good as Michael Jackson. Great, we got Michael Jackson.
Right.
We don't need this other artist. I'm sorry, you sound like him, but we're not going to put out another record to go against.
Yeah.
He's already given us what we want. You know what I mean? It's giving it
but own your
presenting
own
it-
style,
Definitely.
and you can have a similar love song,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. Owning your own style.
I mean, the world is always, as you always say, the world is always looking for its next love song. So there's enough room for everyone, but just be the original.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So true.
But you had said too, when it comes to the packaging, is that, all of these elements go into that charisma, that unique person that you are,
Yeah.
and showcasing it, and not being deterred by those that, maybe say, you know what, this doesn't look like you.
Yeah.
You don't seem like you. Like you see me on the playground and everything else. You see me doing hopscotch and everything else. I've evolved. I've evolved.
That's a hopscotch.
Jackson hula hoop would be next, wouldn't it?
They'll jump rope action.
Yeah.
No, it's true. That's
is.
like when you are packaged and you don't look the same. That's kind of the point.
Exactly.
That's kind of the
Yeah,
point.
some of them have said when they've left our photo sessions, they go back and show their team, and
Yeah.
they're like, that doesn't look like you. And that's the point.
Yeah.
We're not trying to give you more of who you are.
We're trying
to give you more of who you are on the journey to
To
be.
become
Yeah.
the evolution of who you are. Yeah.
2.0.
Yep.
Yeah. It's
The
crazy.
version that's going to get you to where you need to go is not the version that got you to where you're at. And it's hard. It's why I loved last year, the year of the snake.
Yeah.
Because it was all about shedding. And, the reason why the snake sheds its skin is so that it can grow bigger.
Yeah.
It can't grow bigger in the same skin.
Yeah.
And I loved that metaphor. It was very powerful for me. And of course, this is the year of the fire horse, which is all about momentum and fire, right? And coming out. And I feel I love to watch all the kind of data points of signals in the universe that just are constant reminders that, I've got to be willing to do something that I've never done before in order to have something that I've never had.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a common phrase that I've heard often in the corporate world, but I think it applies very much to entrepreneurship as well, and that is to dress for the job that you want, not
Yeah.
for the job that you have.
Yeah.
And so showing up as the future you, who you want to be.
Yeah.
And just owning that persona.
Yeah.
Now.
I
Because-
am a living example of that. I have always dressed and performed when I was in corporate America, and I had a stellar career in corporate America, Fortune 500 company, and I was always doing more than what I was being paid for. I was always showing up more than was expected.
Yeah.
And then I was always promoting
Yeah.
as a result of it. And I watched it happen to others. If you just watch the patterns of the people
Yeah.
that you want to be like, you'll see they're doing stuff you're not doing.
Yeah. I mean, I think about when I got into Jen Gottlieb's group, I mean, yes, I knew I was going to learn a lot and I wanted to, but I also knew I wanted to be known by her. I wanted Jen to know who I was.
Yeah.
Because I respect her a lot and she's really a powerhouse in the industry and I love everything that she's doing. And I remember very distinctly being very intentional when I'm going to go to one of these events, I'm going to show up as somebody who deserves that attention.
And do you know one of the things that you did so magnificently that I think but may not notice about yourself is that you were so great at edifying her.
Yeah.
And who wouldn't lean in and notice somebody that was edifying?
Yeah. No, it's true. It's not just a matter of showing up looking the part, but also a confident person doesn't have to dim somebody else. A confident person lifts up those around them because they're not afraid that lighting someone else's candle is going to dim yours. It's just going to make you burn brighter. And so if you are wanting to be seen as a confident person, then you're the type of person that doesn't come from a place of lack. You come from a place of abundance. And so I believe that in lighting someone else's candle, making them glow brighter is only going to help you glow brighter in the process.
I notice people who speak fondly of others that are not in the room.
Yes.
And you should know for you who is speaking highly of you in rooms that you're not in. And those are the people you need to lean into. You know, my mother used to say, give without remembering and take without forgetting. So the give without remembering is you find ways to then talk about them in rooms they're not in. It is very attractive to see people bragging about other people and they're not even in the room. You know that's authentic.
Yeah.
You know that person's the real deal. You know that they will do the same for you.
Yeah.
And how there's so much for all of us that's out there if we just lift as we climb, right? And just know that part of our stepping up to the next level is making sure that we are noticing the others that have done it and continue to share and brag about them. And I'm telling you, you have to trust that it will someday be your own turn.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Man, this is a good conversation. We didn't
was.
really know where we were going to go with it, but we started talking off camera. We're like, we should just start recording this.
Hit the record
See where it
button,
goes.
Tony.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, as we were talking, I was just reflecting on some of the people that came into our life that, you know, were like natural standouts, things that made them sparkle in special ways. You know, like I was thinking about Maggie Cook and her salsa that she created
Yeah.
and sold.
That she sold for well over $200 million.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but her story, which made her so unique, made her
Yeah.
stand out. And
Actually, her friends are who got her to make it and put her salsa in a contest.
yeah,
Her friends did that.
yeah,
And then she won. And then it was the next thing and the next thing. And then she got the opportunity with Whole Foods. And then she rented the truck to get down there. And then, her, you know, she's all of what, 5 foot something, very little like me, short like me. And her foot didn't reach the pedal. And she had to get a brick and tie the brick around her foot to give her the couple of inches to hit the pedal to drive down to Texas to be able to meet with Whole Foods that then picked her up. And then, you know, when she was ready to sell, she had a beautiful exit plan. And it's just great stories, right, of what people go through, what they do to package themselves and to get themselves in front of the right people, whatever it takes.
yeah, yeah. You know, I'm reminded of packaging is really a broad statement, but it includes, aside from the physical look, like I think about Apple. I mean, really, Apple's packaging, Tiffany's packaging. You know, you get that physical, and your decision is made. You know, not that you make the decision on that phone based on the packaging, but it speaks a lot to the brand that carries through everything that they do. The colors of their stores, their employees, the way they approach it. You know, Tiffany. I mean, it was a long time before I felt confident to walk into a Tiffany store. You know,
You got pretty comfortable.
Yeah, I got pretty comfortable. Yeah. Lucky me. You know, but you've got that packaging but there's also, you know, the what you feel like after the purchase is made. You know, what you feel like as part of that interaction. And I think for those of us that are, you know, again, speakers, experts, thought leaders, etc., you know, all of that plays into it. You know, in terms of the consistency of it, you know, your website, what you're doing on social media, you know, all of it. You know what I mean? I'd rather see you do more and be and the quality be high than you're just doing a whole lot of stuff that a lot, you know, good thought hadn't gone into it.
Spraying and praying.
It's aimless. You know, it's aimless. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What's been your experience with that, Briana?
No, I think that people underestimate what goes into building a really strong brand and we keep using the term packaging. I'm curious if people are like, what are they talking about? You know, to some degree, because it's also beyond that. It's even just the catchphrase, you know, what is the tagline, you know, like Nike's just do it, you know, it goes so deep. And I think that professional touch can really make a difference because what I know time and time again, even the people whose branding, I admire, that have opted to work with us, illuminate another level for themselves just based off of getting your brand in front of the eyeballs of someone else. So whether it's us or not, I would encourage every single person to, find somebody who isn't just anybody. You can't just ask a friend. I think this is another big mistake when it comes to packaging and getting feedback for your branding, is going to somebody who is either not your target market,
Yeah.
or doesn't know what they're talking about in the branding space.
It's like going to somebody that eats steak every day and say, teach me, give me feedback on how to become a vegetarian.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to find people that know what they're doing.
Yeah, people like go to their spouse or their partner, their boyfriend or something who is not they would never want that person to buy from them. That's not their target client at all. And also they're in finance. So,
And they're biased.
Yeah, and they're biased because they love you. You know what I mean? Or their best friend, right? Or somebody that doesn't either fit the mold of your person that you're wanting to work with, or understands branding and marketing at a deep level. And so I would identify who that person is that has the credentials, and just check, because it also needs to evolve. I think that it's not a one and done thing. Messaging evolves, branding evolves. We're on our third
Your
or fourth.
customers evolve.
Yes. So if you're not evolving with them, you're gonna get left behind, right? Yeah.
Great conversation.
So good. I loved it. I loved the unexpected twists and turns that we went with this one. I'm curious your feedback. If you enjoyed this episode, definitely leave us a comment. Let us know. And if there's any topics that you want us to cover, also drop a comment. Let us know. Make sure you subscribe, all of the things, and let us know that you're enjoying this. But until next time, I think that she doesn't just mean business.
She means millions.